How did we get here? How did the world find itself standing at the dawn of 2025, feeling like the ground beneath our feet had completely shifted? It wasn't an accident. It was the result of 5 years of quiet battles, economic warfare, and political choices that reshaped our reality. From 2020 to 2024, the global economy went through its most radical transformation since the end of the Second World War. What we witnessed wasn't just a series of crises. It was the birth of a new economic era. And for those who weren't paying attention, it felt like the world was spinning out of control. It all started with a crack in the system. The pandemic didn't just cause a health crisis. It shattered the very foundation of global trade. Supply chains, once hailed as a marvel of efficiency, snapped. Suddenly, the world realized how fragile its interconnectedness truly was. Then, as if on cue, war erupted in Europe, redrawing the world's energy map overnight. Inflation, once a distant memory for most developed nations, returned with a vengeance, spreading across continents like a wildfire. Currencies tumbled, entire industries faltered, and central bankers, the supposed masters of the economic universe, found themselves trying to tame a beast they no longer understood. For decades, we lived by a simple mantra. China is the factory of the world. It was cheap, it was efficient, it was reliable, until it wasn't. The pandemic exposed a critical vulnerability: our over-reliance on a single source. Suddenly, having all your eggs in one basket didn't seem so smart. Nations began a process of strategic rethinking. The idea of just-in-time manufacturing gave way to just-in-case. Countries started pulling production back home or moving it to allied nations, a concept known as friendshoring. This shift wasn't without consequences. Production costs soared, fueling the flames of inflation and making it a stubborn, persistent problem. Global trade routes, once flowing freely from east to west, began to fracture and redirect. Amid this chaos, a crucial question echoed through the halls of finance. Where will the money go next? To understand the future of money, we have to look at its past. For over half a century, the United States built its economic dominance on the petrodollar system. This arrangement ensured that oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, was traded almost exclusively in US dollars. This created a constant, artificial demand for the dollar, cementing its status as the world's reserve currency. But in the last few years, the pillars of this system began to tremble. A historic shift was underway, quietly at first, then with gathering momentum. Nations like China, Russia, Brazil, and even traditional US allies began actively seeking alternatives. The BRICS bloc didn't just expand its membership. It began discussing a new currency for trade. China started purchasing oil from Saudi Arabia in its own currency, the yuan, backed by gold. Russia, cut off from the Western financial system, accelerated the development of its own independent payment networks. For the first time in nearly 80 years, the US dollar faced a credible challenge. This wasn't just a financial headline. It was a tectonic shift in global power, happening right before our eyes. In this new world, energy is no longer just a commodity you buy and sell. It has become a weapon of strategic importance. Today, controlling natural resources is as critical as maintaining a powerful army. The map of global influence is being redrawn along pipelines and shipping lanes. China, understanding this reality, moved decisively. It locked in long-term oil and gas deals across Africa and Latin America, securing its energy future for decades to come. The United States, in response, sharpened its economic weapons, using sanctions to punish nations that dared to challenge the established financial order. Europe, reeling from the shock of the war in Ukraine, scrambled desperately to find new energy suppliers, realizing too late how dependent it had become. The world didn't just stumble into an energy crisis. It walked straight into a full-blown energy war. And in this war, whoever controls the flow of energy gains immense leverage over their rivals. Meanwhile, back at home, central banks were fighting their own battle. Their weapon of choice, interest rates. After years of flooding the economy with cheap money and stimulus, they slammed on the brakes, hoping to cool down runaway inflation. But the global economy, addicted to low rates, couldn't handle the withdrawal. The medicine was almost as painful as the disease. Debt burdens, already massive, became unsustainable for governments, corporations, and families alike. Consumer spending, the engine of economic growth, sputtered. Real estate markets, once red-hot, froze over. A new, harsh economic cycle had begun. It became painfully clear that we weren't going back to the old normal. We were entering an era where adaptability, strategic thinking, and intelligence would be far more valuable than blindly following old economic models. But here's the most important part of the story. While most of the world was distracted by the daily noise of politics, inflation numbers, and market volatility, the smartest investors were quietly making their moves. They weren't waiting for the storm to pass or for the fog of uncertainty to clear. They understood that in times of great transition, waiting for certainty is the most expensive mistake you can make. They started investing in the future. What were they buying? Not speculative digital assets or fleeting trends. They were buying real, tangible assets that would be essential in the new economy. They acquired vast tracts of farmland because people will always need to eat. They invested in energy infrastructure because the world will always need power. They poured capital into artificial intelligence, healthcare technology, and the data centers that form the backbone of our digital world. They secured access to rare earth minerals, the building blocks of every modern technology. They weren't betting on chaos. They were strategically positioning themselves for the next economic age. Think about it. The greatest fortunes in history were never made during periods of calm and stability. They were forged in the fires of transition. The Rockefellers during the oil boom, the Carnegies during the steel age, the tech billionaires of the internet revolution. They all had one thing in common. They saw the future before it became obvious to everyone else. While the majority was paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, a small minority recognized that uncertainty isn't a threat. It's the ultimate opportunity. The global economy of 2025 isn't collapsing. It is being rebuilt. We are witnessing the end of the age of hyperglobalization and the dawn of a new era defined by economic sovereignty and strategic competition. In this new era, nations are fiercely competing for control over three fundamental pillars: energy, technology, and data. Energy security is now national security. Technological supremacy is the key to economic leadership, and data is the new oil, the most valuable resource of the 21st century. The countries and companies that master these three domains will write the rules for the next generation. 2025 is not an endpoint. It's a starting line. We are at the very beginning of this new chapter. Crises have a dual nature. They destroy, but they also create. They sweep away the old and make room for the new. All the things that seem scary right now, persistent inflation, rising interest rates, currency wars, geopolitical tensions, and rapid technological disruption are not just threats. They are signals. They are flashing signs telling us that the world is changing, and we need to change with it. The rules of money, power, and influence are being rewritten in real time. Those who take the time to understand this monumental shift will not just survive the next decade, they will thrive. The future economy is already under construction. The foundations are being laid right now. The only question left is, will you be one of the architects, preparing for what's next? Or will you be a spectator, just watching it all unfold? The choice is yours. Thank you for watching. If this conversation sparked something in you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're just getting started on this journey of understanding the new rules of the game. See you in the next video.